Okay, hello everyone, and what we're going to do in this edition of Politics Corner is introduce the concept of political authority. Now, authority is probably one of those words that you've used quite often and never actually thought about what it means. You probably have vague notions of what it means, but I've never been actually able to pin it down, and if you were asked to pin it down, you might find that a little difficult. Now, what authority is the right to rule, and the right to have your decisions accepted by those who are affected by the decisions. So if you look at the situation within a family, for example, you might accept the fact that your parents have the right to set down certain rules, even if you don't agree with them, or your teacher might come to a certain decision and you know that you have to do it whether you like it or not, simply because they have the right to make that decision. And you go along with it, what we call consent. And the person who wrote most about authority was a German political scientist and sociologist called Max Weber. And he'd come up with three types of authority. We call this Weber's classification of authority. And he said that there were three types: traditional authority, which we'll look at in the rest of this video, charismatic authority, and legal rational authority. Now, no society exclusively relies on one type. There's often a mixture of the types, although you usually get one predominating. And we're going to start by looking at traditional authority. And traditional authority is where you get your right to rule and your decisions to be accepted through your status. Now, all societies at one time or the other were based on traditional authority. If you look at kings, for example, who used to run states, kingdoms, societies, their authority came from God, what we call the divine right of kings. Because God had ordained that they should be born first in a certain family and be male, then they have the right to implement their decisions and the people should accept those. So all societies in the past probably had some element of traditional authority, and we still see it in some societies today. For example, Saudi Arabia is a kingdom, and the leaders of Saudi Arabia are a royal family. And all the cabinet posts in the government of Saudi Arabia are inhabited by the Al Saud family. Their current crown prince is Mohammed bin Salman, sometimes known by his initials MBS. He's not the official king yet, but he is their ruler. And he is currently seeking to modernise Saudi Arabia. Things like executing women who are campaigning about human rights or chopping up Turkish journalists in Saudi Arabian embassies are getting in the way of that. But in Saudi Arabia, it is seen that he has the right to rule. We also see it in perhaps religious leaders. If you look at somewhere like Iran, for example, Iran has an elected president, but the influence, and remember that's what power is, your ability to influence, greatly lies with the religious leaders in Iran, known as the Ayatollahs. And presidents and politicians will often defer to what they want. We can see traditional authority in dictatorships, even. I mean, if you look at North Korea, for example, we are now on the third in line of the Kim family. It started off with Kim Il-sung, then went to Kim Jong-il, and we're now in Kim Jong-un. If and when he should fade from the scene, it'll actually probably go to his sister, Kim Yo-jong. And they are held up and revered in North Korea. Now, a lot of it's based on propaganda, but they are known as the dear leaders, and people accept their right to rule and see them almost as superhuman. We mentioned religion there, and quite often when societies are making the transition into more modern societies, you will see religion having a great influence and then sort of starting to wane a little. If you look at Ireland in the 1940s and before that, the church had an enormous amount of influence, and their authority actually had an impact upon political decisions. One example that we'll be looking at in a lot more detail in class was the Mother and Children's Act of 1948, which was a very, very light touch public health service. The government was going to provide healthcare, And the church felt that this threatened their interests. I'm not going to go into why, but they thought it threatened their interests, and they made protests to the then Taoiseach John A. Costello. And amazingly, John A. Costello abandoned the plan. And he stood up in Dáil Éireann and he said that he was a Catholic first and an Irishman second. Now, if you think about what that implies that his loyalty to the church was greater than his loyalty to the state, even as Prime Minister. Now, we'll see that influence has waned in Ireland, but there were lots of times even after the war, so for example, divorce wasn't allowed in Ireland until 1992, where you could detect the traditional authority of the church having an impact. So this is all about status. It's about having the right to rule, and it's about having your right to rule accepted by the people who are governed. So again, kingdoms, tribes, pre-democracies would all have a strong element of traditional authority. So that's traditional authority. Don't forget to subscribe.